And I go, okay.
All right, here we go. All right. Hi, and welcome to a special edition of Newsmakers TV, Santa Barbara's most popular and provocative local news program, with analysis and commentary on the air since 2014. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, July 7th, 2023, and I'm very pleased to welcome back Santa Barbara Mayor Randy Rowse to the program for a special Ask the Mayor episode. And we're also joined by my colleague, the multi-talented Josh Molina, who covers City Hall, among other things, for Newshawk. Thanks, guys, for being here. Well, Mayor, you had your journalist hat on this week with some toughly worded op-ed columns about the City Council's recent action, or in your view, inaction, about doing something about the current state of State Street. You were on the short end of a couple of 6-1 votes and another one 5-2. I'm guessing you didn't write the independent headline, but I thought it captured the thrust of the column. State Street in subcommittee purgatory. Downtown Santa Barbara faces year 4 of no innovation, experimentation, or aesthetic standards. Other than that, how did you enjoy the play, Mrs. Lincoln? What's the basic problem downtown, and what is your concern about the City Council's recent attempt to deal with it?
Well, first of all, Jean asked me, she goes, "Do you think that's too strong?" The headline. I went, I think you've captured me there.
Oh, yeah, it's a good headline. Yeah.
So the problem is this: we're in this big planning, consultant group thing that we're doing, subcommittees, committees, all that kind of stuff. In the meantime, nothing's happened. When it first happened, when COVID struck and we had to keep those restaurants alive, council did the right thing. But now you've got exactly what we had that was supposedly going to last till about Labor Day of 2020. Now it's July of 2023, and it's exactly the same. Nothing has changed. It's Groundhog Day. And I think people are getting frustrated. I know I'm getting frustrated. I talk to a lot of businesses from all over the country that say, boy, I'd sure be interested in Santa Barbara. What's happening with State Street? Because we're not going to go anywhere until, we're not going to be talking to landlords until we're sure what are you guys are going to do? And I really wish I could sound a little more intelligent. Like, I don't know, because I don't know. And it makes no sense to me, Jerry and Nick, Derry and Josh, that we haven't at least tried to experiment, at least doing what Eric brought up, the idea of like maybe leaving the 500 and 600 block alone, so there's a definitive promenade, if you want to call it that, and getting the rest of it going so we can at least see, because the planning process, it's ongoing, and they're working hard at it. And I'm sure they'll get done with their part of it by the end of the year if Tess Harris has anything to say about it, and she does, and she's pretty sharp. I think that's going to happen, but then it comes back to us for a decision, which has been really a nothing burger, frankly. And going forward, I go, even if we made a decision in February on what to do, then we go, well, where's the money going to come from? That hasn't even been considered. We still have to do Daily Garrett Plaza. We still have a police station. We got to wrap up the library plaza. And we still have a lot of paving to do around town. So there's not a dime identified for anything on State Street. This came up as a project just out of the blue. So I'm frustrated. Nothing's going on, and we haven't changed. And I don't know exactly what's going to work, but I have a pretty good idea what's not working, and what's not working is status quo.
And what, can you just sort of summarize what your concerns are about the status quo and what needs to change?
Well, so you've got about 300 different licensees or business storefronts on State Street. You got 30 parklets, and this really isn't about the parklets. It's really about people wanting to keep the street closed, and there's a lot of opinion about that, about keeping the street closed and whatnot. Opinions are great, but the practical reality is this: a lot of people have a lot of investments on State Street, whether they're leasehold people or property owners themselves. And when we materially change the condition under which those properties exist. And I've even talked to some folks that from different large investors that are interested in the Paseo Nuevo, whenever we figure out how we're going to do that. They also ask that same question: what's the status of State Street? we're pretty interested in doing something there. And this is like many hundreds of millions of dollars of potential investment in housing and retail and a combination of things that would really revitalize the whole place. But once again, they don't know. There's no crystal ball, and I don't have the crystal ball either. And that's why I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated in the lack of any direction. We've had the State Street Advisory Committee, which I wasn't around when they formed it. It's unfortunate. They put 3 of us on there, which makes it a Brown Act committee for council. So none of us can participate. So I can't even really talk about the design, the eventual design. What I'm talking about is the current situation, because I think the eventual design is still out there a ways. And I don't know who would disagree with that. And I go, we need to get some certainty and some surety for people to make the investments we need to revitalize State Street. We got to do it now.
So it's a 2-track process. The long-term planning group led by Dave Davis is going on, and it sounds like comfortable with what's happening there. But it's this short-term situation where we got bikes whizzing around and no traffic and people arguing about parklets that you're concerned about. Josh, you covered this meeting, which lasted 48 hours or something. When they were talking about this, talk about what your takeaway was and how you see the mayor's perspective kind of at odds with his colleagues on the council.
Yeah, it was a long meeting. It was almost 5 hours. And I think that what's interesting is the mayor has made a lot of good points here about what he hears from national retailers, national companies. And a lot of that whole side is only coming from Randy. It's only coming from him when he talks, and we're not hearing it from the staff. And I think that we're seeing a little bit of a presentation problem from the city, because if we had an economic development director who could talk about the issue beyond bikes, beyond parklets, and talk about the big picture of how are we going to get people to come downtown, and here's what some of the national trends show. And Randy's talked to people about, oh, I won't go there if it's a street that's closed. It would be really good to have that data from the staff, because then it's not just the mayor, right, who's saying it. It's actual information that's come from another source. The other thing is, what's interesting is that there's a lot of advocacy for keeping the street closed for an idealistic sort of philosophical reason, which is we want to be able to go downtown and walk and bike, and this is healthy, and this is the future. And a lot of that was built off of these surveys the city did. And again, even the city staff, I think it was Brian Bossy, had said, these are not scientific surveys, right? So people can vote, probably multiple times if they clear their cache cookies. And also, who are you getting to vote? You're getting people to vote who kind of feel that way. That Kristen Sneddon made the point is like, well, we've had multiple of those and they all are kind of the same. But I think what's missing in this conversation is a approach that shows more data from the city of Santa Barbara's perspective, because otherwise it's just going to be Randy talking, and Randy keeps saying the same thing, and he's going up against candidates who want to run for re-election, who are district elected, and they're of a generation where, maybe it is a little bit more fun to walk downtown and kind of eat and not really care about what's going on. But this could be a good segue into Cass Ensberg. But there's a whole other population that feels really strongly that downtown is not for them. And I think that's the point Randy's also trying to make is, hey, we can't just worry about the 30-year-olds who can be mobile and bike downtown on their electric bikes and go have a glass of wine and then walk down or bike down to the beach. There's so many other people with a perspective who don't show up on a Tuesday.
All right, a lot to unpack there, Mayor, but let me start with Josh's first point. Is the staff dropping the ball on this in terms of not hearing what you're hearing, or not gathering data, or not making a presentation about the sort of sweep of the problem?
Well, there's a lot of ways you could look at this, Jerry. I mean, the end of the day is council directs staff. They give direction, do X, Y, and Z, do different things. And a lot of this was directed while I was off of council. And I, unfortunately, or unfortunately, every way you want to put it. And we're trying to redesign something that frankly, I'm not really sure called for redesign. It needs to be energized, it needs to be cleaned, it needs to be lighted. But as you'll hear me say many, many times coming up, fair warning, we can have it all. We really can have it all. We talk about people that want to have a walkable downtown. That's precisely what we designed when the RDA came through in the first place, years and years ago. And then slowly we filled up the sidewalks with planters and big brick things and benches and whatnot. And we've taken some out, we've done this and that. If you returned the sidewalks to their original configuration, you'd have plenty of room for the adequate sized dining, plenty of room for people to walk. People right now, I'm on that street every day, just got back just a minute ago. People aren't walking in the street. You'd be crazy to walk on the street. The bikes are zipping by at 40 miles an hour. They're walking on the sidewalks where they should be, next to the shops, next to the buildings and whatnot. We can have linear traffic, maybe only one way, who knows? We could have a shuttle again, which would be really handy for everybody. The folks at the Granada talk to me all the time going, isn't there a way we can open maybe our block during shows? Because we got our elderly guests. And I go, we either are open or we're not. I mean, that's just kind of the way it goes. So there's a lot of folks that are crying out for something different, but it really is. I mean, Josh hit the point about the generational thing. There is a generational thing on this, and there's this ideal. And unfortunately, the ideals, my ideals go back to the 70s before that generation was born, when a lot of these things were tried. We called them urban malls back in those days. And there was a guy named Dave Weiner who spoke at the meeting and said, almost 90% of those have failed. The ones that got started were taken out again all over the world. And then there's a lot that are hybrids that are kind of traffic with some kind of thing. But we can have robust outdoor dining. We can have a great walking street again. And we can get rid of, what looks to me like, we took a bunch of fireworks stands from Ojai and stuck them on the street and call them parklets. I'm sorry. I don't blame those guys for not putting a ton of money into it, because we haven't given the direction of how long they're going to be there. Why would you spend a bunch of money? So it's not the restaurant guy's fault. Everything comes back to council.
And all right, expand on this idea of the generational conflict that's going on here. How do you perceive that? Is it old people like myself that can't walk so good versus Josh's millennial friends, or what is it? Different values? Is it different things they're seeking downtown?
Oh, so that's where Josh's friends are. No, it's I think a lot of it is this, and you'll see it a lot and just in terms of like COVID. My God, the COVID for the young generation was the Great Depression. It was a world changer. The world shifted on its axis and whatnot. And for people that are older, we've seen things before. It was a major hiccup, but it really didn't change the rotation of the earth around the sun. It really isn't as dramatic as you think it was. It didn't change the world forever. Everybody always wants to put their mark on the XY graph and say, this is where the game-changing play was. This is when the playoffs were won or lost right here. And, then after a few years, you kind of go, oh, well, that really wasn't it. I mean, hashtag Me Too is probably one of the biggest social upheavals we had in years. And who talks about that right now? I mean, those problems still exist, but we've moved on to other things. This is another one of those things where you have a design district that's protected in our charter. You have 98 years worth of parades and traditions that existed down there, but you also have a lot of stakeholding businesses and property owners that are going, yo, what are you doing with my leasehold? What are you doing with the value of my property? And I think those are real concerns.
And I would just want to say too, is I think unfortunately there's too much personalization of this issue, because what happens is like a guy like Jim Cannell, he can be out there saying, I'm the biggest property owner on State Street and my tenants don't like this. And people will just hear Jim Cannell because for whatever reason, they have a perception of Jim Cannell. And so they'll dismiss Everything else he says. And Jim Canal, like everybody, says things we disagree with and a lot of things we don't agree with, but a lot of things we do agree with. But he has a perspective as a property owner. The other thing is that, Randy's exactly right. If you walk down the middle of State Street, you're kind of doing this, you're kind of looking behind you to make sure nobody's whizzing by you. And it's fine. And if I could try to summarize the generational gap, it is like a lot of what we're seeing in our society right now. It's activists who are driving the agenda because elected officials want to be able to appeal to these constituency groups. And I'm separating them from the actual restaurant owners. So if you own a restaurant, yes, you have a stake. You want more outdoor dining. It's good for your business. And that's fine. They should be advocating for themselves, and the council can decide that. But then we have these other perspectives who are like, we need to be healthier society. We need to get rid of the car. We need to be able to be fit and mobile, and we need to shop at the farmer's market and carry a little duffel bag and walk home. And, all of this sort of stuff that works for a time in your life when you're 5-7 years, maybe, before you decide, well, I need something else. And right now the council's sort of planning 9 blocks of State Street for that. Honestly, close State Street to the 500 block, close it to the 600 block, but you don't need all of that. Make a little 2 or 3 blocks of a little downtown hub with no bikes and, or maybe a shut, whatever, they can figure it out. But I don't understand why there's so much of let's keep the whole thing open closed, as opposed to if the 500 block is hopping with people, fine. The other blocks aren't.
Well, didn't Councilman Friedman, what was not his proposal to sort of address exactly what Josh just said, to kind of mix and match the blocks and do different things?
Yeah, the 500 and 600 blocks. One of his points was, if he said, hey, I'll meet you at the promenade. Well, what does that mean? You got 10 blocks to figure that out. Whereas it could be a very definitive promenade. And it could, it could be that whole promenade could also be improved, cleaned up, lit, done much better than it is right now, even, and have them be even more successful. That'd be fine. But the rest of it, like Josh said, it's a wasteland. There's a desert. You walk out there and there's the biggest, blackest bike lane you've ever seen, and that's all we've got. And it's not fair to all those surrounding businesses and the storefronts that could be filled. I don't know. I don't know what that answer really is. And I can't give you data or stats. I just know what I've been told, number one, but I also really know what has not worked. That's not working.
Yeah. Josh mentioned Cass Ensberg, architect who submitted some drawings about possible things. And she wrote me a long email. She's watches the show, and just one thing really jumped out at me. She says, Santa Barbara is a uniquely beautiful city that does not need to be redesigned or reimagined. Santa Barbara's essence needs simply to be recognized, restored, and built upon. And that seems like it's sort of one side of the continuum here of this generational thing. And then we have Josh's hero council member, Megan Harmon, who moved here about a week ago, who says we need to change that paradigm to one that permanently commits to and prioritizes robust communal life. I can almost hear the trumpets in the background. Robust communal life in the form of our State Street promenade, and robust communal life in the form of outdoor dining, including parklets everywhere in our city. Mayor, are you against shifting paradigms or robust communal life? And can you explain what the hell she's talking about?
Rule number one, never trust anyone who uses paradigm and communal in the same context. That's pretty darn scary. And Megan, I'm talking to you if you're listening out there. No, I mean, this idea about trying to socially engineer something we have out there, I go, we have all the elements. I mean, Cass is not wrong. We don't need to redesign it. We need to manage the assets that we do have. We have a tremendous amount of assets on State Street. We've always have had. And people thought, oh, State Street was over. It was dead. I'm going, Yeah, a couple of years before COVID, it was. A few years before that, we had one of the lowest vacancy rates in the state of California. So retail does this. It goes up and down. And retail, yeah, the big, long, deep shops with all sorts of inventory, maybe that ship has sailed. But every generation, Jerry, as you know, has always tried to put their stamp on their time. Oh, this defines my generation. We certainly did it back in my era. We sure as heck didn't listen to our parents, although as we got older, we started calling them the greatest generation, although I'm not really sure that's going to be what our moniker is someday for our kids. But this idea
For my kids, it's the worst generation.
oh no, I mean, okay, boomer. Yeah, no, I've heard it all. I hear it from Megan, actually, believe it or not. She's actually but it is important to respect what it is that you do have. Yeah, I mean, if you want to change it and clean it up and make it more exciting, that's great. If you want to put in something where we can close off parts of it for farmer's market or for an event or whatever, that's great. But don't take away the essence of what it was. Don't take away, if it's the tradition of parades, I mean, there's no children's parade scheduled this year, as far as I know. I know there's no holiday parade. I go, okay, we're not going to live or die based on that, but really, is that why why are we doing it? What's the purpose? What are we getting out of that? So as going back to what Josh mentioned about the 500 and 600 blocks, you could do that now as at least an interim until the grand plan is done, because whatever we do today doesn't necessarily affect the grand plan. And if the grand plan doesn't close the street back down again, well, then that's probably the right decision. If it does close the street down again, there we go. That's the right decision. But right now we've got a no decision, and that is not the right decision.
Yeah. What about the new subcommittee? Is that anything substantive? I mean, I get the Brown Act argument. I think that's good. Things are in public, but is it going to change anything?
No, I mean, I don't get it, because okay, a Brown Act committee means that you'd have to staff it. You have your attorney there, you have your city manager there. It'd be one more thing to somehow schedule, which I don't even know how we would do, because we're trying to right now consolidate certain committees, because we have so many staff commitments to that. We don't have a ton of staff. That is problematic. But number two is, whatever you do, whether it's planning, not planning, but ordinance committee or finance committee, those are advisory to council. So if you really have something you want to bring forward to council, bring it forward to council. I mean, there was some intimation of somehow this was the administration's fault that these great ideas weren't coming forward. Hogwash, absolute hogwash. It's up to us, if we are that interested, to find a colleague to bring a 2-person memo and put something on the agenda if you really think you've got a good idea to talk about. But that subcommittee, as I said in my article, the only thing I saw, and I was frustrated by it, and we kind of went back and forth about it, was the rate structure for the parklets. And they brought it forward along with staff, and then they voted against it unanimously. From the committee, I don't know how many times in my life I'm going to use the word gobsmacked, but I was gobsmacked by that. I go, well, now what do we have? And then finally somebody came up with, okay, let's call it $2 a foot. And I'm kind of like, why bother? And that left, by the way, over the 3 years projected, that will leave about $1 million in general fund money that is not collected on the table for maintenance, not counting the amount of money we spent so far and this will be our 4th summer of doing this with no rent at all, subsidized by everybody else in town. I mean, I'm a restaurant guy. I was part of all that. I know how hard those guys have it. I know how hard it is to work, but at some point in time, you got to go back to the community and make it right for everybody. And I don't think we're doing that right now.
Jump in there, Josh. What do you?
Well, I want to shift gears and ask you a little bit about the budget. I mean, I guess it kind of links here. We had this moment where Council Member Kristen Sneddon really took a stand against the transparency of the budget. She sort of challenged Rebecca Bjork. Of course, she would tell you she's got great respect for everybody and she's not questioning their intents at all, but she did challenge them, and she said it wasn't transparent. She implied that there was a secret budget separate from the budget that the public was seeing. And I had never really seen anything like this covering any council, really, the last 20 years, where right there in front of the whole world, a council member is challenging a city administrator or city manager about the transparency of the budget numbers. And, you and I exchanged a couple text messages after my story came out that morning. What's your take on that? I know that the budget's over. Were you upset with Kristen? Talk a little bit about what that moment meant in terms of you as the mayor and how it's sort of going to happen going forward.
Well, yeah, no, I wasn't very pleased at all. Because number one, if you don't understand something about the budget, that's something you do. We have each one of those departments has a separate individual full 3-hour meeting to talk about the budget. The budget director, the finance director, will sit down with you anytime if you don't understand something. And it was really a very simple matter of, how you carry over capital from one era to the next one. It's not fully expended, but every dime of our budget is expressed in this public document. So it was a misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding part's okay. However, when you call out a staff member from the dais, you really don't have, it's the one-legged man in the butt kicking contest, as they say in the old South. It's not fair, because it's the staff's response is yes, council member, no, council member. And a council member bullying from the dais is never a good thing. This isn't the only time this has ever happened in the history of council. But it's untoward, it's unnecessary, and it's not productive. There's a lot of things I could accuse individuals of, and I won't do that here. But I really think it's
go ahead. Come on.
Yeah, I know you're just no, but I'm just saying is that it's not professional. And I got a lot of comments from retired staff and other people and going, wow, that was really, and then there's adjectives that were attached to that, but it was not good. It's not pretty, and it's not impressive. It impresses no one. I mean, yeah, you might get the odd, comment like, yeah, get the attaboys from people that hate government in the first place. And that always comes through. That's fine. But it's really unfortunate, because there's nothing more transparent than what we do. We are buck naked out there, and you can find out anything you want about us, the finances, or whatever, the click of a button. So yeah, I was pretty upset by that. That's not how I want to run an airline. That's not the kind of decorum or the conduct that we should have from the dais.
Mayor, everybody knows we have a city administrator form of government, but you occupy the only at-large seat on the council. You're first among equals. But
like
how do you account for coming out on the wrong end of these 6-1 votes? In other words, why is it that you're not able to move toward more of a consensus in the middle on these things?
Well, I got to tell you, Jerry, that's a great question. And, you would hope that your leader or the person in the bully pulpit would be able to pull everybody along for the ride. And I would love to do that. There's one thing, and it's maybe why I shouldn't be in public office. I never think about a subject outside of the one we're talking about at that particular time. I don't have a calculus of votes where it says to me, if you vote this way on these 3 things, I'll vote that way on those 3 things. I don't do that. As I like to say, I wasn't good at calculus in school, and I'm really not good at political calculus. So the good news is I don't lose sleep over these things, because maybe I would make a mistake, but I didn't do it for the wrong reasons. I've always had the right reasons for that. And that's kind of what I stick with. So sometimes when you're with people that are either running for office or feel like they're perpetual candidates, clearly we got a relatively chronologically young council, except for maybe Jordan. But he's a candidate, they may want to be taking these things into effect. the party sometimes gets in the way. Well, that's not what they're gonna like, or the union, whatever. And I go, I've never thought that way. I won't think that way. I don't think we should think that way. But that could be why I'm the Lone Ranger up there on so many things, because I don't think that way. And I'm not trying to say that's virtuous or whatever, but that's just really who I am.
Yeah.
Jared,
Hey,
I do want to say too,
okay.
one of the joys of being a journalist is, if to be a good journalist anyway, is talk to everybody, right? And everyone talks to you. And they're going to take their votes. But I will say that even though he may not be leading a consensus on State Street on this issue, what I do hear from the council members is they really love Randy, but on this issue, they don't get him. So it's a difference. It isn't as though they don't respect their leader, or not, I mean, first among equals. It isn't as though they don't respect him. They just don't agree with him on this. And their calculus is, we lose way too much if we don't advocate for this like bike, eco, environmentally friendly
Know what
downtown.
it is? I mean, because I don't understand
That's their calculus, but they
the
they
value.
love Randy. The next issue, they'll be right behind him 100%.
But I'm really baffled about why they won't make a change. Is it a values argument? Is it because of all this tree hugging stuff that
Well, let's go back to the communal paradigm, whatever it is you were talking about before. A lot of it is that. A lot of it is that ideology, that part of being on the island, about being, that what goes on, whether or not it's a political party thing or not, or an ideology. There's like, this is who I describe myself as, and and I've always rejected labels of any kind, conservative, liberal, whatever the labels are, Republican, Democrat. But a lot of people embrace them as an identity. And I don't know what I could do to change that. I just try to bring forward the things as logically as I can, and then challenge my counsel. And I tried to do it the other night, but not successfully, but challenge them to prove me wrong, prove me that my logic isn't right on this subject. Now, some of those things, Josh, you talked earlier about statistics or data or whatever. And that stuff's not forthcoming. And some of the things like the polling data isn't really data or facts or scientific. It's just, do you like chocolate? Oh yeah, let's have it every day. Well, kind of one of those things where, how do you say that? But the common sense is the dictum I think we need to follow. The common sense thing says, hey, State Street isn't moving right now, at least the most of it. We can't shut the whole thing down based on one block's activities. And it's where we're at right now.
So you conclude your piece by saying our policies must be inclusive, fair to a diversity of businesses, and encourage new enterprises. Our current status doesn't provide that standard, and we must move decisively if we are to regain vibrancy and vitality in our downtown business quarter. The time is not 3 years from now, but now, right now. So what choices do you have now? I mean, how are you gonna make that happen right now?
Well, I am, as we speak, I've been going around. I spent some time with property owners yesterday morning. I just had lunch with some earlier today. There's a lot of folks who have been writing me, unfortunately, going, "Hey, Randy, great job." I go, "Well, that's great, but you're talking to me. Let's talk to the world." There's a lot of people who have been relatively silent in this entire thing. And even though Jim Cannell did speak the other night, he was the only business property owner that got up and spoke. And you're going, and I think, okay, well, thanks for that, guys. But I know, I used to be the president of the restaurant association at one time. I mean, getting businesses to speak out at all on their own is hard. Getting property owners to speak out at all is hard. And they're just wondering why I don't get something done. I go, well, I need some help. I need some backing. My problem isn't in the public. I can get public opinion. My problem is, how do I convince my colleagues this is the way to go? This is the right thing to do. And that's one of the big problems I have right now is bringing them along for the ride. And that is a failing in leadership. I'll own that. I can't do it, but there's a lot of things I won't do to accomplish that. And that is probably where my weakness really is I won't compromise and say, well, okay, if you do this, I'll do that. That's not a quid pro quo. It's the right thing or the wrong thing.
So if I hear what you're saying, you're going to continue to try to organize sentiment behind a different approach to the short-term part of State Street and try to revisit it down the road?
Yeah, I mean, part of my thing is saying to my colleagues, tell me how you defend maintaining status quo. I mean, given the compromise that Eric laid out for the 500 and 600 blocks, how do you defend against that? What's the logic you have? Because we're clearly not, getting anything. Everybody's complaining about bicycles. Well, did we have a bicycle problem when we had open to traffic? The answer is no. We could have bikes walked in the 500 and 600 block, just like we do during farmers market, and then ridden otherwise. Did we have, could we have a trolley? Well, not without cars, but a trolley would be really good because people like to come down to the street, look at it that way. It might get grandma up to the Granada Theater. They could be dropping her off on Uber or whatever it is. And then once again, there's the whole retail thing. And what do retail markets say? They, and consultants, even our own consultant will say, retailers don't like closed streets, and you don't close a slow street and pretend that it's going to be busy. That's not how you do that. You don't pick a slow street to close.
All right. Hey, we're over, but I want to ask you a couple things real quick. If you could just give me a quick update on anything new on housing at La Cumbra Plaza?
Not that I understand. No, I know that the Taylors, they're working on other plans with Brian Cornell, and I haven't heard anything different than that. We're still going back and forth, of course, about whatever the eventual building height could be, and we have a charter that we have to defend, which is, so. But once again, it's always hard to determine exactly where you measure from, especially on a property that starts up at Sears and goes all the way down to Macy's. So we'll see how that.
So are we going to have a specific plan for the whole caboodle, or is it going to be two parts, you think?
I can't answer that. I would have preferred, obviously, to have the specific plan kind of for that reason, so we could really plan for that whole neighborhood. There may be two specific plans or maybe no specific plan. I don't know. And but they still have to work out development agreements if they don't with staff. So, and I've talked to the Taylor since then. I think everything got off on the wrong foot. We need to be a part of this. We need it to be a good project. We need it to work. And to work, we need to be a team. And I think that's my approach to it is, how do we work to make this work for the community? Now, let's get away from the adversarial part of it and let's figure out how we row to the same shore. I think that's key.
And what's happening with the Airbnb police? The people that are going to kick in the doors and find out if you're illegally having guests on the weekend.
Well, we're shopping for uniforms right now. No, that's coming forward. I don't know when that actually is going to start happening or whatnot. I'm working to see if we can also make sense of a reasonable Airbnb policy. I know that Eli brought one forward that nobody likes, so I think that's a good start. Nobody likes it. It's got to be a good start. And we can go forward and find out if there is a way to make it simple, understandable, and doable so that people can preserve their neighborhoods, but still have the ability to use their properties that they occupy, as opposed to people that buy properties for investment purposes and say, I just want to put an Airbnb out there and come see it, twice a year to go see Johnny at UCSB. So there might be a compromise there. I'm kind of working on something right now that's in part of my secret laboratory downstairs.
All right. And then what about cruise ships? Is there's some a little bit of simmering at the Harbor Commission, I guess, about closing the window or making the window tighter, or what's going on with that?
So there is a subcommittee, speaking of subcommittees, and they have to staff and whatnot, about cruise ships. And yes, now there's a revenue piece to it that the waterfront, obviously needs and wants. And there's also the environmental piece, which I went out to the cruise ships and spent about an hour with their environmental officer. And I was highly impressed on their tracking, record keeping, what they do, because they had to be in Monterey as well, which is also a very sensitive marine environment. And then there's eventual talk about the kinds of cruise ships and the newer retrofitted ones that will be even cleaner and better. So I don't know what's going to happen in the long run. And I don't know how long that, I mean, it's amazing to me that industry is able to survive COVID, frankly, but they have, and they're still around. And so I don't know, but there's a lot of things like the ships out in the channel, you're down to, 9 or 10 knots for these ships, and they're going slowly through there, and it's a whole different animal out there now. So
Josh, you got anything else?
No, I just wondered if I'm gonna be seeing Randy at the rooftop swimming pool at the Forever 21 building, if they actually approve that.
it's really funny because I saw Ray propose that, and that's what he's known for. There's not going to be parking, so I suppose whatever it is going to be with that lot 2 behind it. So I don't know how that works exactly. I don't know the details behind that. There'll be a lot of outcry. Why aren't you making that housing? I go, because it's not my property. But it would be, certainly would be nice. I don't know how those things even pencil, to be honest with you, how they pencil either way. I'm sure Ray would be encouraged to do housing, but if he so chooses a hotel, I will say this, anything in that building besides the nothing that's there now would be good. It would be activity. It would be more life on State Street. So that works for me. So if that's the project that's going to go forward, I'll get behind it all I can.
Yeah. How about if we go back to the cannabis museum? You're gonna be for that too, or? All
Yeah,
right.
that's been such a raging success everywhere. Oh, wait, this is council. I'm thinking on the supervisors for a minute. No.
All right. Mayor Randy Rowse, who the greatest paradigm communal life shifter that we know, or
You got to do this when you say paradigm, by the way. So
or the perhaps the communard paradigmatic life.
I hope Megan sees this one. I hope you see this.
Oh,
Megan. It's for you.
I have a funny feeling we're all gonna make sure she sees this one.
Oh yeah.
We'll get the email from her instead of you this time. All right. Randy Rowse, Josh Molina, thank you so much. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.